Good evening, everybody. And as part of my continuing coverage of the military due process system and what needs to be fixed, I have honed down on the issue of false allegations because I can't really think of anything that I've covered in my 4.5 years of doing the Stories of Service podcast that is just so blatantly unfair and has ruined lives, has caused so much damage, and is not talked about enough. So today we are talking to Mr. Doug James. Doug, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing not only your personal experience, more importantly, what you experienced while you were running a large nonprofit that was dedicated to helping those who unfortunately were victims of false accusations. So, as I always get started with this podcast, welcome to the Stories of Service podcast. I am the host, Teresa Carpenter, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. And to get us started, as we always do, we will start with an intro from my father, Charlie Pickard.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to S.O.S, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter, here from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
And we already have Darren Lopez on the call. Darren Lopez is a prior guest who so bravely shared his story with this issue just a few weeks ago. So Doug James, he is a retired U.S. Air Force Colonel, A320 Captain, aerospace strategist, and former president of Save Our Heroes. He has flown 119 combat missions, worked alongside General Petraeus and Mattis, led crisis response efforts across the Pacific, and testified before Congress to advocate for wrongfully accused service members. From writing industry standard safety checklists to fighting for justice in a broken military legal system, his story is one of unrelenting leadership, integrity, and purpose. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about his experiences flying the A-10 and F-15 in combat, coordinating multinational forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. But most importantly, we're going to be talking about how false accusations nearly destroyed his career, and more importantly, the careers of so many others that came after him and what he did about it. He also testified in front of the Senate, as I said, and led with Save Our Heroes. And now we're also going to talk about ways that we can fix this problem and what we must do to protect the innocent. Welcome again, Doug.
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, most importantly.
Absolutely. It's such an important conversation that we need to keep having. And I will keep having guests on, and this will be a continuing series on the Stories of Service podcast as I explore all aspects of this issue. And from your standpoint, first off, before we even get into that, where were you born and raised, and why did you join the Air Force?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Northern California, born in Monterey, grew up in Santa Rosa, California, Northern California wine country. I always wanted to be a pilot since I was a kid, not necessarily a fighter pilot, but just a pilot. And went to pilot training at Williams in Arizona. It's since closed down. And then did pretty well out of there. Flew the A-10, which I loved. I loved flying the A-10 as a lieutenant. Was, I like to say a license to steal flying the A-10. Did well again, and then went off the F-15, flew the F-15 for two different assignments, one at Eglin. I was there during what we called the Burger King assignment system. So I stayed there for 4 years on the beach and then went right down the street to Tyndall and trained people how to fly the F-15. And then up to the Pentagon. I worked at the Pentagon for 3 years in fighter requirements. And then as a reservist, I stayed and worked legislative liaison. And then back active duty, you mentioned working for General Petraeus and General Mattis down at CENTCOM for almost 4 years, which I really enjoyed, even though it was a desk job. And then back to my civilian employer, and then finally ended up in Hawaii working ops for PACAF headquarters in Hawaii. Another great assignment, obviously. So I cannot complain about my assignments.
No, you've had a very, very, very distinguished career. And I always think the people that get to do the aviator jobs or do some of the cooler things that we offer and harder and quite harder and are just some of the people that I just admire the most. And tell me a little bit about how you became acquainted with the justice system. You did work on the Hill, And so you probably got exposed to service members who had been impacted by military justice system or had something happen. But tell me just a little bit about how you got involved in this issue.
Yeah, like you said, I was on the Hill as a reservist, actually about 8 years or so. So that's how I learned pretty much the system. Not that anybody's an expert, but learned the system, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But my career ended up on a false allegation against me, and I'm not going to go into details because this isn't about me. This is about the other people out there that are falsely accused, in my opinion. And so we fought and fought hard against a really baseless allegation. One, I was retired quickly. And then ran into Save Our Heroes because, quite honestly, Teresa, I was mad about it.
Right.
The quote I was told, which I always tell, is take your gift and go home. And it took me 2 days to sit down, and I said, what gift? You guys, I got retired. That's not a gift. I wanted to stay in. So I said, this is not right. And then I found out about Save Our Heroes. At the time, they were looking for new leadership. And then started with them. Gotcha. And I was shocked, Teresa, shocked when I got into Save Our Heroes. This is, we were following 300 cases, and I could argue that over 50%, in my opinion, were false allegations.
And actually, that's a great place to start, because one of the questions that I had that a lot of people do have is, how did you guys, when you first got into this, how were you able to sort of piece which people that were coming to you that really had a legitimate issue with this problem, and then which people needed to be punished and are being held accountable properly?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I when we were on the Hill, I got asked that all the time.
Oh, I'm sure.
You can see the threads of every case, and you can know right away, yeah, this is a false allegation. Obviously it's not proven that it's a false allegation, but the threads of false allegations are pretty much the same. Usually it is a wife who's gone through a messy divorce, a girlfriend who's broke up with their boyfriend. It could be even a service member that wants to get the permanent change of station, PCS of their choice. Maybe they want a great job. Simple game theory kind of kicked in. They knew they could get this stuff, and then they got VA benefits and blah, blah, blah. It's a really easy thing to kind of identify when you start throwing in the motives. I will tell you, there were cases that I got involved with that were the other way. It was obvious that this was true. This allegation was not false. In fact, I just got involved in one a couple of years ago. But they all followed the same format.
Right.
And I can tell you, and as it comes out in this discussion, I can tell you cases that track the same almost exact fact pattern, as they say in the legal world, but they're different cases, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And one of the things too that I neglected to mention is that Save Our Heroes did have 2 investigators, people that worked in investigations, who would also look at these cases, look at the evidence, and determine if these were people that you wanted to work with and reach out to and help, and then people who had what they deserved. And so that's the first thing is determining which of these cases are false and which ones are not. But the problem was that you weren't able to rely on military justice or the legal system to parse this out through their investigators or through their lawyers. And tell me a little bit about when you saw it in your own experience, and then now saw it being repeated by people you were coming in contact with, Save Our Heroes. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, well, you got to look at the genesis of this, what started it.
Okay, and I'm going to put you on full screen so that I can help people can see and take in what you're saying.
Okay. The genesis, the start of this was the pressure of Congress. They believed there was a serious sexual assault epidemic within the military. And so, 2015, 2016-ish, they started putting huge pressure on the military to fix it. The military was pushing back, saying, hey, we got this, we can handle it. And then this kind of unwritten battle started. There was a couple major cases that kind of started this going the wrong way for the military. I think the one that hit home the most for me was General Helms, who was Lieutenant General, female astronaut, flew on the shuttle 5 times. Incredible lady. Incredible
Lieutenant
role.
General Susan Helms. Yes.
Right. Incredible role model for women. And she got wrapped up as a convening authority in one of these cases. Now, the convening authority, for those who don't really understand how the military judicial system works, but in one of these cases, the convening authority is the person who makes the final call on what happens to the individual. General Helms at the time got involved in one of these cases, felt like this person should be held accountable, but not in the way that Congress assumed. General Helms didn't feel there was enough data there to make the call that the Congress was expecting.
So she just didn't think there was evidence. She didn't think there was evidence, evidence to convict. Okay.
No. And that's her job. Keep in mind, she's the convening authority. That's what she's there for. Mm-hmm. She was a 3-star at the time. President Obama had just nominated her for a 4-star to be head of Air Force Space Command. What a perfect person to be. You look at the history, female, shuttle 5 times, was actually on the ISSS. I didn't know. Anyway, Senator McCaskill at the time thought that she was making a poor decision, and because of the pressure, she put a permanent hold on her nomination.
Over a case that was under her purview.
Exactly. And you can read, you don't believe me. Don't believe me. You can read about it. It was all over the newspapers at the time. Bottom line is she had to retire. That's a shame for our country. And that's going to lead me to something down the road later when we discuss this. But bottom line, I think that sent shockwaves to some of the general officers and high-ranking individuals in the military that, oh no. Basically, they were a dead man walking or woman walking, i.e., they had to either convict an innocent person or else they were going to lose their job. Because one of the things we harped on when we were on the Hill with Save Our Heroes, it only takes one senator, just like we saw in Senator McCaskill's case, to hold a general officer's nomination and basically end their career.
And also not tell them why. I mean, that was my understanding too. That you don't even. And do you even have to know who held the who held it back? Like, is that even public?
It was public at the time with Senator McCaskill. You can read about it.
Right. I'm curious though, if now, like, can one senator hold it back? You not know which senator it was, or you not know why? I mean, that's it's incredibly crazy to me, and that definitely probably sent shockwaves through the rest of the flag officer and general officer community, that if you don't follow suit and do the same thing, then your career, everything you've worked for your entire life, everything you've had up to this point is now going to be gone. And I'm sure there were some people who probably retired before this even could impact them. But if you're put in that position, what do you do? And then it becomes, what do you do for the pleadings? Like, do you get a young military member to plead out, or do you try to find ways to not make it go to this point? Because now you're in this position that it's going to get the attention of Congress if you make what they consider to be the wrong decision.
Correct. And we saw that. And in fact, that's in the history books as well. There's a famous case, General Crawford, who was the assistant JAG for the Army, actually the Navy at the time. He forced Admiral Lorge to reverse a decision on a Navy SEAL. And it was actually shown in court that this is what he had done. And so it's called the unlawful command influence. And it was actually proven in court that Admiral Crawford did that. UCI is what they call it for short. So that's what they started doing. There's some other weird stuff. I had 2 cases that were very familiar that I can recite, and I'm not going to go into details. I'm not going to say names, etc. But typically what we would see is the convening authority knew the situation, and they knew all they have to do is get some sort of conviction / NJP, non-judicial punishment, and they're good to go. Congress is going to come off. So we've seen multiple times where that's what'll happen. They'll go to the individual, and especially if it's a lower ranking individual, they'll say, hey, so that you don't have to go to a court martial, I'm going to give you NJP. You know, they might sugarcoat, say it's not going to hurt your career, which we all know is false. We're going to give you the NJP, and then you can go on your merry way. Otherwise, we're going to take you to a court martial. Now, I would always say, if you're innocent, go to the court martial. Call their bluff. And I have had multiple cases where they called the bluff, and the next thing you know, the case is dropped. It might be a year, it might be a year and a half later, but the case is dropped for no reason other than go away. So that's what we saw a lot when the pressure was put on these convening authorities.
Right. And I think what they wanted to do was show that they were being tough on sexual assault. So if they could show that they were being tough on sexual assault through NJP or through a plea deal that didn't have to be litigated in court, then they saw it as a win-win, when it was in fact hurting the service member, because they could not now advance in their career. They would, like you said, we're going to talk about, they could be titled. I mean, there's all kinds of things that would happen from these NJPs. And now you have a person who might not even get all the benefits that were afforded to them for joining the military, post-military.
Correct.
And that type of knowledge, I don't think is very well known unless you're in the more senior ranks like me and you are. If you're a very junior sailor or a junior service member, you don't always understand what the ramifications of these things are going to be. And tell me a little bit about the defense side. So you have the defense service offices that, and you are afforded a quote unquote public defender from the defense side. And then you have the prosecution side. But tell me about what you've seen and sort of the patterns with Save Our Heroes, with the resources that the service member would be afforded through the defense legal service office.
Well, what we saw is typically the defense was over their heads. They could honestly, Teresa, they could be the defender one week and on the prosecution side the next week. And the bases are so small, they would talk to each other on Friday nights, and they would talk to each other about the cases. So you weren't getting a fair shot. The defense would try to help the convening authority in a roundabout way to get what they wanted. So they would say to the accused, who's technically their client, hey, yeah, NJP might be the way to go. And so we typically saw that. Now, you brought up the higher ranks. Yeah, you're older, more mature. Think about the young 23, 24-year-old, sergeant, staff sergeant, and we call them in the Air Force. They're going to be scared. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They're going to be scared. They've got some colonel breathing down their neck. So what do you think they're going to do?
Whatever it is that they want them to do.
Yep, exactly. So that's typically what we saw. Honestly, I don't want to throw the military legal system under the bus, but the defense was over their heads. They really were. They didn't understand. They didn't understand simple phrases like said. And now a lot of civilian, you could go to a civilian attorney, a family law attorney, and they know exactly what said means: sexual assault and divorce.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think it exists.
Yeah. I think too, that's sort of where the problem stems from, is a lack of resources that were fair on both sides, resources for the defense, resources for the prosecution. It seems like the prosecution not only has the JAGs, but they've got this entire convening authority chain of command who's now weighing on this issue all the way up to Congress, right? That wants a certain outcome. And so it's that against a sailor. And if that, especially if a sailor has a highly publicized case that's in the media, well, then every convening authority's bosses and bosses and bosses are now going to weigh in on this issue. And then that's where I think we're seeing these examples of unlawful command influence, because now the military just wants this thing to go away, and they want to find a way to mitigate this as much as they can. And so tell me a little bit about how Save Our Heroes would help them.
Yeah, well, we had seen so many cases of these, Teresa, that we knew, like I said before, we knew the fact pattern. We knew what would happen. We knew some of the tactics that the prosecution would use.
Like what?
So I won't go into details.
Okay, but, I understand.
Yeah, because, I mean, proprietary information.
Sure, but, fair enough.
There are some aggressive tactics that military investigators will use. That's all I'm going to say. And so we would talk to them about it, to be careful, blah, blah, blah. And so, so that's what we'd do. We'd also help them, with their defense, basically get their facts together. You would be surprised at how naive, and I could throw myself into this too, how naive people are when they're under investigation, how they can't believe that their leadership would be investigating for something as stupid as it was.
Right.
So we would help them level set the playing field. Hey, you're investigated. This is not good. Here's what's going to happen, and here's what you need to do. So
what were some patterns that you saw, like the ways in which these cases would fall apart? What were some of the reasons why the people that would get justice did?
Okay, well, very simple stuff. You'd be shocked. We had one that went over a year. And again, I'm not going to go into very detail, obviously. One that went over a year, and they just did some research on who went to the gym and at what times, and found that it didn't make sense because they had all the gym records. I mean, simple stuff. We had one where a TV show wasn't on that the accuser said was on. I mean, this is basic stuff that you could go
basic
look at week one and go,
procedures. Yeah.
Right. You could look on week one and go, it can't happen.
Right.
But they would go through a year and a half investigation, and then that would be their coup de grace and say, well, it didn't happen because the gym record said it didn't happen. Come on.
Wow. Do you feel that there are also things that are baked into the court-martial system that set it up to not be as fair as it would be if these cases were being litigated on the civilian side?
Yeah, for sure. We were on the Hill multiple times with Save Our Heroes. One of the big things is you don't need a unanimous panel decision to convict somebody in the military. I think it's 75%, basically 6 out of 8 on a general court-martial. We actually, this is the scary thing, we were actually on the Hill in a office. I won't tell you what side of the aisle it was, or what side of the building, but where a staffer admitted that they probably put a innocent person in jail from a panel. So that was
somebody
a big
that had
thing.
Served on a panel and told
Exactly.
you this.
Exactly.
And understood that this was already baked into the system. I would say the panel issue, the fact that it doesn't have to be a unanimous verdict. And then the other thing that I've been told about is the number of attorneys that are afforded to one side versus the other side. So one side is an accuser of something, of some sort of a crime, and then one side is the accused. And as far as I've learned, is the accuser gets a set of attorneys from a special victims unit, and then the accused is sort of stuck with whatever defense attorney happens to be available at the moment, who may or may not have even seen their case or is familiar with their case or really has the bandwidth to dig into their case.
Yeah, usually the defense gets somebody that's a junior lawyer on at the wing, or the wherever the unit is, that they basically want to throw to the wolves. Yeah, the accuser gets the special victims, gets their own lawyer basically, which added some complexities. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it adds some complexities to the whole process itself, because now you have 3 lawyers, to keep it simple. You've got the prosecution, you've got the defense, and now you got the special victims unit lawyer. So, or the accuser's lawyer. So how does that work? And they haven't been able to define that. They haven't, and there's cases where, the accuser's lawyer is getting in fights with the other 2. No, this is true. You can look all this stuff up.
Right. And what were some of the things that you learned when you started advocating for this on the Hill? Like, what was the reaction to Congress when you started to talk about these issues? What was their feedback, like, in general?
Well, first of all, this is a hot topic. So it's like a, hot potato. Nobody wants to touch it. So you kind of understand that, but you don't, because innocent people are getting thrown into jail. So that was probably the biggest reaction. The staffers, I think, understood, but then it got killed once it would never get to the member, because now we did have some members that were interested but didn't go anywhere, and we knew for a fact, mainly you're constitutionalists, because it is unconstitutional in my opinion. But the other side will say, well, the UCMJ is not supposed to be constitutional. That's the counter argument. So the Hill is just a hot potato. And, you mentioned I testified in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I think it was March of 2019. It was a subcommittee led by Senator Gillibrand. And we had a tough time getting in that in the first place. They didn't want us in there. And the whole hearing was on sexual assault in the military. And there was one side that was for the victims, and then our side was for the accused. And I think, honestly, Teresa, they understand it's an issue. And my big thing that I said was, this is a threat to national security. That was my big thing I harped in the 5 minutes I got to speak, is this is a threat to national security. And I had a stack of stuff defending my position next to me, because I was ready for the hammer to come and all the nails to come to me from Senator Gillibrand and whoever else was on that committee. And nobody said a word, because they realized it. You could take, if you wanted to, without firing a shot, you could go into an O Club on a Friday night and take any high-ranking individual you want out with just a allegation. They know it.
I mean, that's also, to be honest with you, why I feel there's a lot of people who get out before they take command or will not take command, is because they're terrified of having to deal with this issue or be accused of this issue. Either they're going to be accused, or they're going to have to weigh in on someone who's been accused and then feel pressured to come to a certain conclusion without there being sufficient evidence to prosecute for a crime. And I was hopeful that with this new administration, that this was something that was going to be looked at. We haven't seen that yet, or I'm not aware that they've looked at this issue yet, but I remain hopeful, because I believe that somebody like Hegseth, who has been accused himself, would personally understand something along these lines. And so I stay hopeful that this is something that they'll want to look at and realize has led to people that are, like you said, likely sitting in jail today and have exhausted their appeals, but unfortunately they were under a system that was stacked up against them no matter what evidence they had.
And the sad thing is, Teresa, they don't even have to be in jail. I know of a couple cases where they were young fighter pilots accused, and the military kicked them out basically for no reason at all. They weren't tried or anything. They just made them go away. Now
that's a national security issue, because these are warriors. These are people that
you spent millions of dollars to train those kids. In both cases, they were young and now you're kicking them out for no reason at all, basically, because you're scared.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. And I say this all the time, and I'll say it. I said it in Congress a number of times. These general officers are more scared of Congress than they are the bad guys.
And that's what's unfortunate. It really is. I mean, this issue reminds me on some levels of the COVID mandate issue. Like, instead of really litigating what was considered FDA approved or what was considered legally distinct and interchangeable, they just made a blanket determination that it was a lawful order. And now, years later, it's still being litigated, whether it's in the press or if it's in court, whether or not it was a lawful order. But instead of just really taking the time to really investigate if this was the right decision, we just threw out a bunch of warriors who are pissed, by the way, and won't back down. And this issue is, to me, very, very similar. This is an issue that these guys aren't going to back down from, and they can't, because people's lives, their careers were ruined. And as you said, this is a threat to national security, because it's going to keep happening unless something changes.
Yep.
So what are some of the resources that people have today if this happens, if they're accused? What advice would you give them?
The biggest advice, it's a tough one to swallow, but if you're accused, you have to get a civilian attorney as well. There's plenty of experts out there in this. It's going to cost money, and that's the one thing that is tough to talk to some young kid who doesn't have this money, but it's your life, so you're going to have to pay, because you're not going to get the help from the military side. You're really not. So, just pay it. And then if you really aren't guilty, fight like hell. Don't give up.
Right.
If they say go to a court martial, go to a court martial. Make them take you to the court martial.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my advice. But you got to get the civilian attorney. Realize the gloves are off.
What have you seen in terms of press coverage? Do you think that it's advisable for someone to take their story to the press before it gets adjudicated, to see if there is support for that person? As we know with Eddie Gallagher, for an example, that was a very successful, but he's also in a different category. He's a SEAL. He's got a very extenuating, a very, very compelling story. But is that something that you've seen that could help some of the people that have been impacted by this? Because I do believe that we're in a strange part of history where I think people are starting to get it. I thought I would get more grief or blowback for these shows, but I'm really getting none. And so I'm wondering what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, that can work both ways. I think if it's high profile, obviously, Eddie Gallagher is a good one. So yeah, I can't. Yeah,
it's a hard one.
It could go either way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
But again, I go back to my other statement. If you're not guilty, use every lever you can to go for it.
Right.
Use your Senate. Use your senators. Use your congressman or a congresswoman. Go through them. Say, hey, here's the deal. I have seen that be very successful.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, Congress is not going to say, oh, yeah, you're innocent, but they are going to put the pressure on the military to go, okay, you're putting my constituent in jail. You better have a good story. That will happen. Mm-hmm. So that's why you do that.
No, I understand. Absolutely. What would you say are some of the, I guess, what are some of the ways in which you would see the system work? Like, have you seen some cases where they were done properly and the investigators did their job and the defense did its job and the prosecution did its job and the person was exonerated in a timely manner? Has that ever happened in any of the cases that you saw?
No, to be honest with you, I can say that from personal experience. I got that direct line.
Right.
Yeah, the system worked. No, it didn't work. If it took a year and a half, 2 years to figure it out, it didn't work.
Right.
So
it doesn't take that long to investigate these cases.
Right.
It's just
these cases they're cut and dry. I mean, is the civilian the civilian authorities don't even want to touch them because they know there's not enough evidence there.
Right.
So then they pass it off to the military. So, and it's almost like the military is always trying to prove a negative, which is tough to do. So,
right. They're just looking for evidence. And one of the ways I've also been told that they do this is they'll start digging into your past. So if you've been accused of a violation or of a sexual assault, they will now then go into your past history and interview every single person that you've ever come across. And sometimes someone might have an axe to grind from your past. And then now you've got another charge or another allegation because somebody now sees an opportunity. Or so I think, and it goes both ways. I mean, it sucks I kind of understand why they're doing it, because if this person committed this terrible crime, then they definitely want to make sure that there wasn't anybody else who'd been impacted. But at the same time, it can unfortunately work against the person as well.
Yeah, keep in mind back to what we said earlier. They want to get a conviction. It doesn't matter if the conviction is the one that everybody thinks it is. If it was 10 years prior or whatever, they found something, it's a win for them. So, yeah. But yeah, again, won't go into all the tactics that they use, but yes.
I think then just going forward, if you were sitting next to SecDef and he came over to you and said, "What can I do, Doug, to fix this problem?" What would you say?
I would say, first of all, you got to redo the whole system. You got to make it unanimous court decision. You got to take the pressure off the convening authorities. You got to realize that false allegations exist, because they do exist. Congress has actually admitted in congressional testimony numerous times that false allegations exist. So you have to, I mean, they sit there and they say at this sapper training or whatever that, there is no such thing as a false allegation. Not true. Congress has said there are such a thing as a false allegation. And I can bring you up the cases, but I'm not for time. Yeah. So that's what I would do. Start there, but make it a unanimous. Give the defense the resources they need. Get rid of the special victims unit or the special victims
council. Yeah,
council. Yeah, get rid of that. That's not doing any good. That was just to make it look good for Congress. That's all that was. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can do.
And those things are not, I think, hard to do with the right people in place to fix those problems. Those are not, and those are things that I feel like the majority of the public would get around. Unanimous jury verdicts. Okay, check. Making sure that the prosecution and the defense are both similarly resourced. Check. Making sure that the convening authority, it has nothing to do with the prosecution side. Check. Like, these are just things that I would think with the right people in place would just happen.
Yeah, you would think that, but when we were at Save Our Heroes, I signed personally and was on the Hill to take those 3 or 4 things that we talked about to try to get rid of them. Personally talked at multiple congressional offices. That didn't get any traction. Another thing we did was finally, in the end, we just sent notes to both the Judiciary and the Senate, Senate Judiciary Committee, asking just to hold a hearing on it. That didn't get anywhere. So they just don't want to touch this issue at all. Now, maybe under the new administration they will, but that's how it went. It went from here's some solutions to just hold a hearing and some stuff in between, and they don't want to do any of it. So,
right. Yeah. And I can see that that's very frustrating for people that worked on this for 4 or 5 years or however many years you did. And then to just see that there was just no appetite in Congress for them to address this issue. And here we are, 2025, and we're still talking about it. And there's still people impacted by it. So I believe that this is a problem that is not just about false accusations. This is a due process problem. This is what I think this is. And this, when I say due process, I'm talking the administrative investigative process, I'm talking the court-martial process, I'm talking military justice in general. And that is one of the things that I really rest my advocacy around, is fix the military due process system as a whole. Because if you fix that, all these other problems then will also fix. But Congress is just going to keep hearing about this if this doesn't get fixed. They're going to keep getting letters from their constituents. They're going to keep getting these nasty news stories. So they can choose to ignore it all they want, but it's not going to go away, and it's going to keep coming up in the press.
Yeah, it's amazing. Teresa, I thought it would kind of die down, but it hasn't. I mean, I'm getting calls all the time, still on cases. And like I said, the fact patterns are pretty much the same as a case I did 5 years ago. Honestly, it's that close. You could go, okay, yeah, I've heard this before. Numerous times on the phone, I've talked to people. Yeah, I've heard this one before.
Well, the good news, like I said, is the fact that I don't think that in this current climate, I'm getting any crap for talking about this. And I've always made clear and said it in many other shows. I mean, you're the fourth show I think I've done on this issue. And I've said that I have every I have no doubt that there are, like you said, 50% legitimate cases. And those 50% legitimate cases, or whatever it is, those must be prosecuted and those people must be held accountable. But those 50% don't get to be at the expense of the people that were not guilty of these crimes. So that is where this must be properly adjudicated. And the civilian authorities, they can be sued. they have the law, they have the power of the litigation process bearing down upon them. And I think that's also why they are held to that standard where they can't get away with this. And a really good example is the college issue. Like, I'm sure you're familiar with that. So Can you tell our audience a little bit about what happened there?
I can't remember the specifics. I'll let you tell that one.
Okay. Okay.
Familiar.
I can. Yeah. Well, I think it's called Title VI. I can't remember. I know we've got somebody on this
Title 10
call.
Yeah.
Well, bottom line is they had sexual assault issues on college campuses all over the country around the same time. And my understanding is they kind of did the same thing the military did. They started cracking down on it. They started holding these Title IX, thank you. And they started holding all these different kinds of mini court cases like NJPs or something along those lines. And men were getting kicked out. They were probably getting titled in the civilian community. They were and I'd love to talk to somebody from a college campus that this happened to. And the parents stepped in and said, nope, we're not going to put up with this. And basically remedied the situation. So if we can take what the colleges did and apply that to the military, I really do believe that there might be a solution there.
Agreed. I think you hinted at just the Pharaoh doctrine or whatever, where you can't sue the government.
Yep, Ferris doctrine.
Yeah. And so I think that's a huge issue, which that was one of our recommendations. Hey, allow it. And of course that got shut down. So.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Doug, we're not going to stop talking about it on the Stories of Service podcast. And if you have recommendations for people that we can talk to, we will do it, because I will continue to make this a big part of my advocacy, because I want to think that one day we'll have safer environments for people to serve in, environments where they're more afraid of dying in combat than they are of Congress. Because unfortunately, we've created a place where people aren't safe serving, and that can't go on. It can't.
Nope.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about, or anything else that you want to cover down on that we haven't gone over to this? Because we've talked about the threats to national security. We've talked about. Did we talk about VCJCS General Hyten's case?
No, I kind of alluded to it, but that's one you could say is a proof that there are false allegations, because General Hyten wasn't convicted. And he was accused and wasn't convicted. So obviously that's proof. And I think it was Senator Sally at the time who actually said in a hearing to the accuser, something happened but not what you said. So right there is a senator saying in testimony, it's a false allegation.
Right. Right.
So
And yeah. And so they know that this is a thing, and they know this is something that we have to get our arms around and we have to solve. And
right.
I'm hopeful that we will solve it. But as I said, I do believe that the way to solve this is not to hone in on the COVID mandate, like the advocates on X want to just focus on that, or not just focus on this false allegation issue, but fix the military due process system. Because when you fix that, then these other issues fix. But what are your thoughts also about re-examining some of the cases that have already exhausted their appeals with conviction integrity units? Curious.
That would be the first thing I would ask the SecDef. I'd say, hey, sir, let's look at the whole system. Let's also go back while we're looking at the system and look at these cases. Because honestly, Teresa, there are a lot of people that I know that are in Miramar or some other brig in the country that don't belong there, honestly. And so those cases need to be looked at.
Right.
So yeah, that would be the first thing I would ask the SecDef. Please look at those.
And to look at those cases, there are examples within particular cities who've done this. So if they wanted to see like, well, how do I do this? How do I pick which cases to look at? There are processes in place within the legal system that have been set up to do conviction integrity units, correct?
Yeah, and I know you had Mike Kinsaki on, I think the last time, and he was a big proponent when it was Save Our Heroes about a conviction integrity unit. And again, that was something we brought to Congress, and
as another solution.
Yeah, and they didn't. I we had a laundry list of them, but they didn't get any traction.
Well, I will say I appreciate you continuing to talk about it. I know that this isn't easy, and I can tell there's some scar tissue from all the work that was put into this that didn't sadly come to fruition. But it reminds me of the Staff Sergeant Carter situation with the Ferris Doctrine. I had him on my podcast. He's paralyzed, sadly, from a back surgery gone wrong. And he told me, if anything, I'm just going to keep talking about it because I know one day in time, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, I'm paving the way. I'm showing that this was a problem and I'm creating that historical record. And I think that sadly, that's the best that we can do because we're not in control of being the ones to fix the problem. All we can do is make that history and create history with shows like this that say, this is still a problem. These are the people who are impacted by it. You're getting calls about it every day to this day. And this is why it's so important that we give people relief. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and talk about this.
Yeah, and thank you. I really, really appreciate your, because a lot of people don't want to talk about this stuff. They really don't. And one thing I would like to talk to you at another date is titling, because that's something near and dear to my heart as well. So.
Well, let's go into it a little bit because we have some time. We didn't go use the full hour. So tell me just a little bit about what that issue is.
Well, that's kind of for this overall judicial thing that you're talking about. One way we're kind of chipping away at the overall problem is with titling and trying to get rid of titling. Basically, in the military, if you're being investigated for anything, it could be, sexual assault, it could be, travel voucher violations, anything, you have an investigation started on you, and then you become what they call titled. I like to call it a scarlet letter. And basically this titling stays with you for basically ever, unless they can prove there was nothing to begin with. And they have a technical term for that, but titling will follow you. We have cases where they want to use global entry for traveling. They can't get it because they're titled, even though this person was told they weren't titled. They were told it was removed, but it shows up as a shadow record in the FBI system that makes it look like there was an arrest. When there wasn't an arrest, it was just an investigation. And this is started in the military system, but then transfers. This is one of the bad things of having all the systems talk to each other, because then it transfers into the civilian world. We were lobbying in Congress a couple weeks ago to try to get this removed. I think we're making good progress. It was going to be on this last NDA, but I think we got it, started the ball rolling a little too late. I think it might be in the next NDA, but there's high profile people that are titled and know they're titled, and will probably help us in this particular case. So it just makes no sense.
No, I agree. And this is also important to note that there's other things too. No buying of guns, no working with kids, no law enforcement work. So there's quite a bit of repercussions that are happening when somebody is titled. And just because you've been put under investigation, as we see with some of these investigatory procedures, they're not always done in the most scientific format. So if they're not being done properly, then anyone can go under investigation. So this is very important to ensure that people have their due process rights protected, and not have this scarlet letter, as you say, following them around for life. So thank you, Doug, for your work and the work of many others who are working on that issue. I really can't thank you guys enough for all the people that are willing to come on and talk about this, because you're right, it is not easy. I think I am one of just a handful of shows that's willing to take this on, and it's unfortunate. And as I've always said, I mean, we've seen the Duke lacrosse case. We're seeing now reports that maybe Harvey Weinstein, while he might have been a womanizer, he might have been a creepo, he might not have been a rapist. And these are conversations we need to have. And so I really look forward to some of these larger military podcasters, looking at you, Sean Ryan, to do some of these kinds of shows, because they're incredibly important and these people need to be heard. So in the meantime, I will keep talking about them, probably until I'm blue in the face, but
Thanks, Teresa.
That's just what I'm going to do. So with that, anything else that we didn't cover down on that you'd like to add?
No, I just appreciate you. One thing I'll say is, I've had multiple chances to do interviews on this, and for some reason, they never materialized. So this is one of the few that has. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I will continue to keep calling on the military podcaster community. I'm going to the Military Influencer Conference coming up. I'm going to the MCon in Las Vegas coming up. And I'm also going to the VFW National Convention. So top of mind will be talking to my fellow podcasters who are all change makers and change agents on the internet, and say, well, hey, I got a case for you that is really ripe for some change. So anyway, all right. Thank you so much, Doug. I'm going to go full screen, but I will meet you backstage to say goodbye as I go full screen.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the Stories of Service podcast. All right, guys. Got it two this week. Tomorrow I will be having Aaron Love. Aaron Love is a fellow patriot, and he's also a co-member of the America's First Veterans Organization. It is a political advocacy group for which I am the Mississippi president. So cannot wait to talk to Aaron about politics and the administration, what we've done good, what we've done bad, what we could do better. So it'll be a spicy conversation, and one that I'm really looking forward to. But on the note of this conversation, I know it's a very serious topic. I appreciate you guys staying with me and continuing to support the Stories of Service podcast, where we'll continue to be talking about the issues that matter and they're the most important to our service members. And as I always say, to close out these calls, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye now.